Hi, this is economic crisis in Germany during the first period of the Weimar Republic. So I'm gonna first get into the more like the Treaty of Versailles because Germany lost the war and they had to fulfill the treaty. Then I'm gonna get into the crisis itself. So the Treaty of Versailles was the thing that most caused crisis in Germany by this time. Let's say, well, they lost territory, they lost reparation, they had to pay reparations, army restrictions, war guilt, and League of Nations. So you take the first letter, that's Troll, Trawl. So territories. I'm not gonna give you a lot of detail because you don't need that much, and it's just gonna be me listing things. But Yukon and Malmedy were lost to Belgium. Alsace-Lorraine was returned to France. Um, Memo was lost to Lithuania. Prussia was cut off from the main part of Germany by the Polish corridor. The free city of Danzig was the port city of Danzig was declared a free city under the control of the League of Nations. The Saar was placed, which is the industrial heartland, was placed under the control of the League of Nations for 15 years. Certain territories could hold plebiscites to stay in Germany or to leave Germany. Then overseas colonies were confiscated. West Prussia and Upper Silesia, however you pronounce that, that was given to Poland. And overall, 15% of arable land was given to the Allies, as well as 75% of all iron ore, 68% of zinc, 26% of coal, and 15%, and I said 15% total arable land. Um, Germany was stripped of 13% of its land, not only arable, but just in total, and it lost 12% of its population. That does not mean that 12% of the German population died in the war. No. It means that out of all the people living in Germany pre-World War One, 12% of those were in territories that were given to the Allies. Reparations, well, Germany was the only nation that was to blame for the war, so they had to pay the most. There were other treaties which weren't that important, but they were important, but not relevant, let's just say. And so it was made to pay the brunt of the reparations. That is 6.6 billion pounds. So quite a bit of money. And the shipping fleet, railway locomotives, rolling stock, patents, all lost to the Allies. So even if they wanted to pay the reparations by improving their own country's economy, they couldn't do that. Just too harsh. Then the army restrictions, well, the navy was 15,000 sailors maximum and 6 battleships, no tanks, no air force, no submarines or U-boats. The German army restricted to 100,000, which seems quite a lot, but compared to other countries, if you want to win a war, you need to be in the millions. The Kaiser and other notable pre-World War One figures, they were put on trial. Although the Kaiser, he wasn't in Germany, he was in Denmark, I think. But there was still a trial, it's just he wasn't there. And most important of all, if that's not, it's either this or the army, like the 100,000. But most important of all, Germany and Austria were prohibited from joining again, which kind of sucks because most Austrians felt German. Most notably, Hitler. Hitler was an Austrian who thought he was German and he belonged in Germany. He really resented the fact that his country could never join with this amazing country which he thought he belonged there. Then the War Guilt Clause, Article 231, said that Germany had to accept all blame for beginning and prolonging the war, which they did prolong it because they could have just gone out any other moment. But they did not begin it. They did not start. Start. They did not start the war. That was more Austria-Hungary and Serbia, but Germany got blamed. And League of Nations was set up, but Germany was not invited because that was what you want. So yeah, that's the Treaty of Versailles. There's really not much to talk about there. There's just a list of facts you need to know, and it was signed by Germany and the winners. So France, Clemenceau, England, Lloyd George, and the USA, Wilson. There was like Italy, I think Japan was there, but the big three were France, England, and US. So what were the attitudes towards peace settlement? Because everyone has attitudes these days, and back then. So let's look at those attitudes. Well, in Germany, they had to accept war guilt for losing a war they had been told they were winning. So, they gave the Nazis a lot of heat about the propaganda, but Kaiser, Imperial Germany, they still gave propaganda. Every regime gives propaganda, basically. The people were told they were winning, and then suddenly these politicians come and say, oh yeah, we lost the war and we're going to give a bunch of our money to the Allies. And you're like, but weren't we winning? Why do we have to pay? Self-determination, part of Wilson's 14 points, that wasn't offered to the Allies. So many who considered themselves to be German just found themselves not German anymore. Say you were living in Alsace-Lorraine, and one day you were in Germany. You didn't move, you were in your house, same place, nothing happened. But one day you were in Germany, and the next day you were in France, but you're in the same place. You were moved from your country, technically. Which, fun fact about the Wilson thing, he was the one who said the whole League of Nations. He also did join. The US never joined the League of Nations. They are in the United Nations, but not in the League of Nations. And it's because Wilson got voted out that next election because they thought he had been too lenient on Germany. Many people in Germany thought that the reparations were too harsh. So it was bad enough before the Treaty of Versailles. Any war basically destroys the economy. But now you have these huge reparations, 6.6 billion, and you're expecting them to pay? No, they don't want to. And Schleiman's government had been dissolved because ministers wanted to reject the treaty. Of course, they didn't want to sign, but the SPD, they wanted to sign, and the SPD were the largest party, so they couldn't exactly ignore the SPD. Hindenburg, Ebert, Groener, they were planning military action. Bauer's government made their opponents state the treaty was patriotic, and politicians knew perfectly well that people wouldn't be happy with the treaty. SPD perfectly well knew that they were going to be unpopular, but it was either that or many more dead, and they did not want that. And that's kind of why the people get the November criminals wrong. They were just looking out for Germany. They weren't really, I don't know, they weren't trying to screw over the people. They just wanted to save the country. It's like on the whole appeasement thing, Neville Chamberlain, he got a lot of crap because he signed the little Munich agreement thingy saying that there would not be a war, and then there was a war. And he got a lot of heat because he had been giving Hitler what he wanted and not stopping him. But I read somewhere, and it makes a lot of sense, Chamberlain, he sacrificed his reputation and his livelihood, basically, based on the fact that he knew that a war was coming up. He knew it perfectly well. But he wanted to stop the war from coming before Britain was ready. Obviously, Chamberlain, Prime Minister, wanted to win the war. So he tried to keep Hitler at bay for as long as he could. And then when he couldn't anymore, they declared war on the 3rd of September 1939. But he tried with all the mission of the Rhineland. Like, okay, fine, you can do that. They could have kind of stopped it, but he said, I don't want to risk military action. I don't want to risk a war. We're not ready. Little did they know, Germany was far from ready back then. Then the whole Austrian Anschluss, if they had stopped that, maybe who knows. The whole Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, that whole deal, they could have stopped it. They didn't, and it's because Chamberlain knew that he needed to buy time for the British Army to develop. Now, history, and this was me before I read the article, remembers Chamberlain for basically being a guy who just bowed down before Hitler when he was, from this point of view, just trying to save the country. who knows? Maybe he was bowing down to Hitler, but I think looking at it that way, it's more probable he was just trying to buy time for Britain. And who knows, if he hadn't done that, he would have just gone to war straight away. Germany was far more prepared than Britain, so who knows? He could be living in a world with Nazi Germany. Yeah, I got off track a bit. German politicians, especially later on, would be Stressman. They tried a policy of fulfillment, which if you don't understand the policy of fulfillment, really easy. What you do, it's sucking up. Just think of it as sucking up. It's basically just giving people what they want so they can be easier on you. I don't know, like an example, but it's just they were like fulfilling the policies, fulfilling the terms, in hopes that the Allies would take pity on them. They're like, oh my God, they're struggling so much, they've never failed to pay. Let's just leave them be for a little while. They'll recuperate their economy, and then we can get them to continue paying later. That was the goal. And well, the people didn't see it that way. The people thought of the whole November criminals and the stab in the back myth, which there's a whole evolution in the stab in the back myth. At the beginning, it was the November criminals. Then it turns out the November criminals were Jewish, and then forget about the November criminals. It was only the Jews who stabbed Germany in the back. If you're gonna insult a group of people, just keep it consistent at least. Just don't say, oh, it was politicians. No, it was Jewish politicians. No, it was Jews. This was the Nazis, basically. That was the opinion in Germany. And outside Germany, Clemenceau wanted the reparations to be much higher. And his argument was, and the historian's argument is, the treaty wasn't that bad. I mean, it was very harsh. But we all know Germany would have done the exact same if they had won. How do we know this? You have to look at the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk signed with Russia in 1917 when Russia opted out of the war. They were really harsh. If you look at the terms of that treaty, wow, Treaty of Versailles seems nice. But if Germany had won, they probably would have made a Treaty of Versailles level or even worse treaty for the Allies. So that was the justification. Also, France had been the country that was the most affected by the whole war. The 14 points in the armistice being published in November 1918, and then the 14 points, I think it was in December 1918 or January 1919. They had plenty of time to, and not the exact terms, but to have an idea of where the people stood. The France, like I said, they thought the treaty was too lenient. The USA thought it was too unfair. Sounds fun. I mean, Wilson still got voted out either way. But yeah, also there's a whole thing that Germany only had 6 days to sign the treaty, which kind of hurt the Germans. But if you think about it, they didn't have only 6 days. They knew with the armistice and the 14 points and the whole October Reform deal, they just knew that they were going to be harsh, and they had time to prepare themselves. Not that much time, but it wasn't 6 days. It was 6 days since they reached Paris and they finally put pen to paper. But the terms pretty much set out way before. So that's the Treaty of Versailles. It's a bit, not gonna lie, it's a bit boring because it's just a bunch of facts, and it's just, you have to learn this. It's not really something you can interpret. You can't. The only thing to debate here is, was it justified? Was it not justified? And that's more GCSE history. This is one of my questions I did for practice. And you have to be looking at the terms, the impact, which when this course in Nazi Germany, Nazi and Weimar Germany, you don't look at the impact that much. You do look at the impact, but not enough to assess the Treaty of Versailles. So, I'm going to now get into the actual crisis. That was the background kind of bit. So first is the reparations. Like I said, the 6.6 billion. The political impact, they only had 6 days to sign the treaty. which caused a lot of resentment. They were getting very little time, and the terms were harsh. And politicians were going to try the policy of fulfillment, but that wasn't popular. But also, their overseas colonies had been confiscated. They had increased debt, and this contributed to hyperinflation, in a way. I'm going to link them all together in a bit. So what were the consequences? Well, Germany talked to the Allies and said, hey, we can't pay right now. So from January to February 1922, the payments were postponed. Which kind of, that just proves the policy of fulfillment works. Like, hey, we've been paying for 3 years. Please let us just take a little break. And the Allies were like, fine, we'll let you have these 2 months. Then in July, Germany's like, hey, can we have another postponement? And the Allies are like, no, you can't. So they had to pay. And then in November, that same year, 1922, they asked for a loan of 500 million gold marks. Quite a few. And to stop payments for 3 years. And France and Belgium, they were like, oh, you want this? You want us to stop paying? Of course. We understand, don't worry about it. But we're still gonna need payment. And since you don't want to give us money, we're gonna need to take it for ourselves. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna go into this industrial production place, the Ruhr, and we're gonna just take the things from there. Not actual money, but goods worth money. So we still get our reparations, and it's a win-win, right? Yeah, no. So the whole Ruhr crisis starts in the 9th of January 1923, when French and Belgian troops invaded the Ruhr. It was 60,000 soldiers to invade reparations, to extract and pay reparations, and invaded the Ruhr. 60,000? That's 60% of the total German army. Think of. And the Weimar government said, oh, you guys want to invade us? Don't worry, you want to take the work our workers do? No worries, fine. Only we're going to order our workers to stop doing work. We're still going to pay them. But we're not going to get anything done. So you can stay there as long as you want. We're not going to pay you. Who's laughing now? Thing is, most of the country's raw materials were located in the Ruhr and were now under the control of the French and the Belgians. So they couldn't produce raw materials. There was a shortage of goods and raw materials, and they still needed to pay something. And this genius went up to whoever it was and said, hey, I have a plan. Listen to this. What could go wrong, right? So we're gonna, we have certain amounts of money. We need to pay stuff. How about we print more money so we have more money? Yeah? Well, now this just decreases the value of money. That doesn't solve anything. And that is hyperinflation. So what is hyperinflation? Well, it was to make up for all the increased money and to pay debts. And it's just the value of money went down, prices went up. And there's a whole debate of who was to blame. But those who had jobs and savings lost their money. Those who had debt before, they just solved that really easily. So this led to increased resentment in the Weimar Republic and the rise of extremists. One of the reasons the Munich push happened was kind of because of hyperinflation and the Ruhr. The Ruhr was most to blame, but hyperinflation, it was basically poor handling of the German politicians. What was the government response? Well, Strassmann, I'll have another video on him in a while, but he introduced a Rentenmark in October 1923, and then limited the circulation of the Rentenmark. I think it was one Rentenmark was worth 1 trillion Reichsmarks, and then 1 year later, replaced it with the Reichsmark. And then the whole DOS plan, which gave them payment They had more time to pay. And I'm gonna get into that in another video. But yeah, that is economic crisis. It's not really that much. I mean, the economic situation in Germany was not good. I'm probably gonna do another video basically detailing the state Germany was in right after the war. But the three main economic crises, anyway, the three main ones were reparations caused by the Treaty of Versailles, the Ruhr caused by reparations, and then hyperinflation caused by the Ruhr. Question is, which is the most important? I've seen essays all over the place, and so many people ask this. And honestly, I have to say reparations. Without reparations, they would have the French and Belgians wouldn't have invaded the Ruhr, and if they would have invaded the Ruhr, hyperinflation wasn't. So I wouldn't argue the Ruhr is the most significant one. I'd argue either reparations or hyperinflation. Either way, you can have both. So yeah. Then after 1923 came the golden age in Germany because that was good, and then Wall Street crashed. But that's another part. That's basically it for economic crisis. There's really not that much. It's a relatively short video because that's it. There's not much to uncover. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there because that's it. Reparations, Ruhr, and hyperinflation. Yeah. So thank you for watching.